Good morning, everyone. Welcome. It's FPC Radio Live. It's Wednesday. It's May 25th, 2022, and we're incredibly almost through this month. And of course, we have playoff basketball, playoff hockey in full swing. Celtics to get back in action tonight. Game 5, pivotal Game 5. Last night, the Mavericks staved off elimination. Now only down 3-1. But John, unfortunately, we gotta start outside of the world of sports today, because yet again another just awful incident. Of 18 people dead in Texas, many of them elementary school children. Devastating news coming out yesterday of an active shooter. The shooter is now dead, but John, it's just another incident has sadly just numbed this. I mean, how many times do we have to go through all this? I mean, to the point now where I told you right before we got on the air, I feel like I'm desensitized to this. How is that possible? How am I desensitized to mass shootings and mass murders happening what seems like on a weekly basis? And it's a tough thing to reconcile, John, because it speaks to where we are now as a society in this country, and how there is a large segment of people out there that value a hunk of metal over the lives of children and innocent people. And I will never, ever, ever understand the devotion to guns. I don't get it. I don't understand. Like, I've fired a gun before. I've done that. I'm not saying I've never touched a gun. I've done that. But this absolute blind devotion to these things that the purpose of guns is to kill. I mean, you can't convince me otherwise. And to me, I've never been able to understand, John, people's just obsession with these hunks of metal and just their willingness to throw away lives to protect what they feel is a right, in which I feel like is not at all. You should not be owning automatic assault rifles. What's the point? Honestly, John, I challenge anyone out there who's listening or who may come across this. Give me one good reason. And I'm not talking about the Tracy Chapman song, all right? Give me one good reason why you need that type of gun. And I don't want to hear about Second Amendment. Forget about the Second Amendment. I don't want to hear this empty vocalization of this terribly understood amendment or right, as many people want to put it. Like, I'm pretty sure that the folks the founding fathers that wrote this and put the right to bear arms. I'm assuming, John, and correct me if I'm wrong. I know you're advanced age. I know you weren't around for that, but I'm assuming they did not have this in mind when they put this in, because if they did, I'm pretty sure the right to bear arms would not be in the Constitution.
Right. I mean, you were talking about, obviously, tyranny and opposing government, and people still go there 240 plus years later that, well, we have to have guns because if not, the government will seize the guns, take over, and do whatever they want to do, which they're quite capable of doing, but they're not going to do. And the thing is that, and you said it so well, Ian, about being desensitized, it's kind of like wash, rinse, repeat.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so sad, right? I mean, it's like, I was on the phone with a friend yesterday and he says, oh, there's breaking news coming in. There's a gunman in Texas. And I'm like, oh, okay. Like, we just saw that like 10 days ago in Buffalo, and we saw it 2 weeks before that somewhere else. It's like, oh, that's just happening again, right? And it's so sad. And I've always pushed back on this because the whole idea that people kill people, guns don't kill people. Well, if you're being approached by someone with a gun and someone been carrying a baseball bat, which one do you think you're going to survive easily? The bat, right? You can kind of, I mean, they could club you to death. I get all that, but you could at least fight that off. You're not fighting off someone with a gun unless you're, Bruce Lee or someone like that. So I've just never understood it. Maybe because I'm born and raised in the Northeast, and it's, I've always lived in a city, so it's not really a discussion. I know now you're in Florida where, there are obviously more people there that are pro Second Amendment than in Massachusetts, but you're still a Northeasterner by heart. I mean, and think these things through. But just to see, little children getting massacred for no reason, or should ever be any reason to massacre little children, it just saddens me. I don't have a child either, neither do you. I have a 6-year-old grandniece who's the love of my life. If something like this ever happened to her, I'd be more than devastated, and I would be very vengeful. I then would be looking to get a gun to kill that person. So maybe I'm no better than them. But it's just a really, really sad thing. And again, it all goes back to the Second Amendment, which no one really clearly understands. It's this text that makes no sense, to be honest with you. I swear the founding fathers are like laughing at us, going, "These boobs can't figure this out down there."
No, I mean it's true, and it's like there's nothing more pathetic than the devotion to the Second Amendment. And I'm sorry again if that offends people. I don't apologize, because I think if you're valuing the possession of a hunk of metal over the lives of children, innocent people, men, women, it doesn't matter, then I believe you have your priorities way out of whack. And to me, you listen, talk about rinse and repeat, John. The politicians in this country. I mean, I've obviously expressed to you off the air, I have a very cynical view of politicians. I think they're all liars, cheats, and scam artists. And this, and on both sides, I'm not, this isn't me picking on one side or the other. I think identity politics are the worst thing to ever happen to a country that claims to be a democracy, because it's the farthest thing from a democracy. It's just a blind devotion to this ideal that, half the time you don't really know what the ideal is. And the other half, it's based on these, archaic notions, generally rooted in the Bible, which again, that's a whole nother can of worms that I don't feel like opening up right now. But the point is, these politicians, it's quite transparent. You have the representative from that actual district in which that school was located, promoting and getting excited about, saying no to an amendment that would add more restrictions to guns. The governor was bragging about, we need to get our gun sales up. We're gonna sign these things into law that allow folks to own guns. You can transfer guns without any sort of notification. So that sort of stuff gets lost in the mix. You don't need these background checks. They're actually going out of their way to loosen the gun laws in this country. And yet we'll turn to Twitter, give you your thoughts and prayers, and, basically give you a big F you, because that's all they care about. And the reason for this, John, it's very transparent. It's money. It's money. The NRA gives them money. So they don't have the balls. They don't have the absolute guts, which they need to have, to go up there and say, you know what? Enough is enough. Like, imagine this, John. Imagine if Mitt Romney, who is one of the largest beneficiaries of NRA money, donation money, came up here today. And instead of giving us, my wife and I, we're thinking about the families and blah, 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 all that bullshit. Imagine if he didn't say that and just went up and said, you know what, enough's enough. Forget about the donation money. Forget about my base that is obviously very pro-gun. I'm changing tune on this because something has to change. That's change, John. That takes guts. And not one single politician has that. They're all gigantic effing. It starts with a P word. You can use your imagination. That's what they are. They lack any sort of fortitude, any sort of guts, any sort of, just anything to decide. Like, think about this, John. They're choosing the right to have a deadly weapon versus the lives of children. Like, I mean, you talk about being desensitized just a minute ago. I saw someone tweet something, or some news organization tweet yesterday about it. This is the worst elementary school massacre in 10 years. How is that a freaking headline? That should be, yesterday's headline should be worst mass shooting in the history of mass shootings. But yet, that's not even the worst elementary school shooting. Try to grasp your mind around this. And then you have, the Mitch McConnells of the world, and like I said, the Ted Cruzes, everyone out there. Again, I told you this off the air. Marjorie Taylor Greene may be the most vile person who has never actually physically killed someone in the history of the things that she says that comes out of their mouth. But these are politicians, and you can't expect anything less, because they're taking money from one of the worst organizations in the world, the NRA. And it's pathetic that, you know, none of these people up here, none of these Republicans or Democrats for that matter, I'm not let them skate. Like I said, all politicians in my eyes are scam artists, liars, cheaters, and only out to benefit themselves. So, you know, if they go out there, they're sacrificing their base, John. So if a Democrat comes out and you know, obviously some of them run on that whole base, but if, you know, for example, there's some out there that are pretty neutral on the topic, and guess what? That gets them votes from the side that's very pro guns too. So they're going out there with, okay, how is this going to affect my support? Well, you know what? Fuck that. And excuse my language. I apologize. I didn't mean to say that. But that at this point, that this idea that you could lose votes or lose this or lose that, that should be thrown out the window. Forget about this. You are the people that are in a position to make a change. Okay, do it. Forget about your base. Forget about getting reelected or the primaries or the midterm elections or, you know, oh, we're going to do this. How are we going to get votes for that? No, forget about it. Do what you were supposed to do and keep the best interests of the people that you represent in mind. And anyone who today or yesterday or last week or 5 years ago sits there and continues to value guns over the lives of human beings does not do that. They're giving you a big F you and saying, you know what? It's okay. We can take a little bit of collateral damage. And by little collateral damage, we're talking about over 300 mass shootings compared to not even that total over, you know, many other countries. And the, you know, everyone's like, oh, well, if you have less guns, there's going to be more. No, we are the only country, developed country in the world that is so gun obsessed that it leads to this type of death rate. It's absurd. I mean, the numbers, it's like, I don't know, John. It to me, it's a pathetic show from politicians and anyone who supports the Second Amendment today. I'm sorry. Again, I'm sorry. If it offends you, so be it. That's just how I feel, because I would like anyone out there to explain to me, short of living in the bush out in Alaska, why you need an automatic rifle and save me the Second Amendment bullshit. Okay, give me an actual reason why you need that weapon, that deadly weapon in your possession. And maybe I'll change my mind, but I can guarantee you right now, you can't give a good reason, because there isn't one.
There is none.
There is none.
There isn't one. And if you want to look at Mitt Romney and just use him as an example, first of all, does he need that money from the NRA? Does he even need that job? He's 76 years old, incredibly wealthy. It's just all a power pull by Mitt Romney. And oh, by the way, doesn't he have like 22 grandchildren? And I'm sure some great grandchildren who are the age of these kids that were massacred. Like as a human being, aren't you there? And isn't he a religious man? He's a bishop in the Mormon church or whatever. Like even that part of you, does that not get to you? And again, the Second Amendment is at the crux of this because people want to debate it. And I'm just going to read it to you with commas and punctuation points and everything. The Second Amendment will, let's see, the Second Amendment, a well-regulated militia, comma, being necessary to the security of a free state, comma, the right of the people to keep and bear arms, comma, shall not be infringed. I read that is to form a militia, the right to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. It doesn't mean every Tom, Dick, and Harry can have a gun. And if we want to go there, what people are looking for, background checks. Like a person who is not mentally stable should not have a gun. Somehow, I know a teenager can't legally get a gun, but illegally they can. And this happened even in the Boston area last week, where a couple of kids showed up to school with guns. I mean, it's like, what? Like, this is not, you know, cowboys and Indians to come to life. It's really, really sad. So that's where the debate is. But again, background checks is important. And I give Steve Kerr a lot of credit, who, you know, before the game last night against the Dallas Mavericks, and again, I was taking place in Texas, so give him even more credit for going off on a rant, for saying that the background checks is the big thing. And a lot of people will push back and go, well, that guy's just full of it. He likes to hear himself talk. Well, his dad was killed by a gunman in Lebanon while teaching at an American university back in the 80s. So I think Steve Kerr can speak to this more than just everyone else, because he lost his dad to a crazed gunman, an assassination, whatever it may be, because he was an American, you know, educator in Lebanon. So he could speak to this. And I'm so happy that he stood up, that I'm like, can we draft him to run for office? Because the rest of them don't do or say anything. They occasionally say things, but then they don't do anything. So look, I like President Obama a lot, but every time he'd come out and go, I'm sick of this stuff. Well, you're the president. Step up and do something. And the same thing with Joe Biden. If you're that against it, do something.
Yeah. What did he say last night? Like, we have to stand up. You're the goddamn president. You stand up. You do what's supposed to be done. Like, I mean, but that's all it is. It's politics is a performance art. We saw it during the election cycle. I mean, it's just a constant performance art. And going back to your discussion about the Second Amendment, I'm pretty sure, that doesn't that didn't mean, oh, you're going to have Marjorie Taylor Greene take election photos or campaign photos with AR-15s and proudly flaunt that, or stand out on your front lawn with this semi-automatic weapon. Like, it's pathetic, and anyone who supports that is pathetic. And it drives me nuts that we continue to have these discussions and nothing gets done about it. Like, I mean, again, I'll throw the challenge out there one more time. Anyone who wants to explain to me or give me a good reason why you should own that type of weapon, I'll be all ears. But I'm going to sit there and tell you that you just can't, you don't have one, because that reason does not exist. It's frustrating to see that we're continuing to have this debate. But then again, that's what it is. I mean, things aren't going to change when you have the same people in office making the same decisions. It's not going to change, and it's sad. It sucks because this isn't the end of it. That it's going to happen again. It's the same stuff's going to get said. That whoever's in office is going to thoughts and prayers, and this has to end, and blah 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 blah. Rinse and repeat, John. Rinse and repeat.
And states' rights always get brought up. Well, I mean, we've kind of moved on that we are an entire country. And I guess there's different cultures in different states, but, wrong is wrong and right is right. And look, I'm never speechless, but this morning at times I feel speechless. Just, when you go through the sordid details and when you just see what happened and how much this destroys families. And then you got crackpots like Alex Jones who thinks that, what happened in 2015 or 2014 was just made up. It was just a makeup by the anti-gun lobby, right? In Connecticut. So I'm like, okay, so that's where we're at now, where everything is just a conspiracy to try to push forward politics, when in fact it's just bad people doing bad things.
Yeah, and that's all it is. And the fact that people can't see the agenda, like Alex Jones did that to make money. That's what he did. He got great.
That's all everyone does. Yep.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. It's all about money. It's why Ted Cruz will get up there and still back the NRA or not denounce it, because guess what? They give him money. Just like it's just that's the cycle. And it's like you sit up there and listen to this nonsense over and over and over again, and it's like, I think to myself, it's like, how can you sleep at night? Yep. Like, as a person, as a human being. Like, how can you go to bed at night knowing that you perpetuate like this type of discussion around these topics? Like, like the people out there that just because their shtick is what it is, you knew what their response was going to be to this. Not word for word, but for the most part, you had an idea what they were going to say, and then like clockwork, there it is, and you're just like, that is just so pathetic and sad. Not for them. I'm done caring about them as people. It's just sad that society and this what we believe to be one of the greatest countries in the world has been reduced to this. This is what we are. Is a country that can't even protect its own people because the protection that's needed isn't a priority. And that is, well, guess what? You got to put it, maybe set your pride aside for just a moment and say, maybe you don't need all these guns. Just maybe. I mean, again, it would solve a lot of problems. And anyone out there saying, well, banning guns don't solve things. Well, how do you know that? Like, well, what's the basis of that argument? Because thinking about it logically, John, you make it far more difficult, obviously, to attain a gun. You make it far more difficult to, produce guns for people, like stringent background checks, obviously mental health checks, all these things, all these processes that you have to go through that needs to happen for you to own a firearm. Eventually, guess what? All those extra guns, all those just like unnecessary collections, like when you go into someone's house and they open up a cabinet and they have like 16 different guns, like what the hell are you doing with that many weapons? Like, why on do you need that? Like there's nothing more than an ego pump when you have that, and just some sort of overcompensation of something. I'll let you figure that out on your own, but to me, you ban guns. That's the start, because logically, you reduce the number of guns out there. You reduce the need and want to go get one, or the ability to go get one. And guess what? This type of stuff is going to stop. I mean, look at around the world. The data is there, John. Like we are, and when I say we are so far the outlier as a country, I mean it's true. I mean it's absurdly true. It's like looking at like a Tom Brady, and this is how we're going to shift things into sports here, because I don't want to spend the whole show talking about this, but it just gets me so upset just thinking about it. But this is like comparing like Tom Brady to Mark Sanchez. Okay, so one graph is going to be all the way over to one side, and that's how dominant he was versus Mark Sanchez. Well, guess what? If you're looking to be dominant in terms of mass shootings, well, guess what, America, you've won. You are a dynasty.
Oh,
you are so far the biggest dynasty that's ever dynastied in the world of dynasties with mass shootings. Congratulations. Oh. I hope you enjoy sleeping with your guns at night, and that makes it better knowing that you are a champion of killing innocent people.
Yeah, we're the Lakers, Celtics, Packers, Patriots, Yankees, and Canadians all rolled into one in terms of dynasties. Yeah, maybe that's a new phrase. Tom Brady is to Super Bowls what the United States is to mass shootings. I mean, this doesn't happen in Japan or Australia or countries that have very strong gun laws, and like people don't even think about owning guns. I remember I was covering the campaign in 2016, so we're up in New Hampshire for the primary, and there were obviously with Trump involved, it generally is a worldwide event when the United States elects a new president and there's a endless campaign, and some of the people from Belgium were covering it and other European countries, and we were just talking back and forth. They first of all, what's the intrigue about Trump? I said, I don't have enough time really to get into that because, we're due back in a few days. But they also said, what's this infatuation with guns in your country? I said, I will start to explain that to you. It really is. It's almost like it's a genital contest. Like I have all these guns. It's like the guy that has the giant truck, right? Who just has to prove his manhood. It's the same thing with the giant amount of guns. And it's just like, I'm going to prove to you how macho I am.
Yeah, the guy who has no military or police training that walks around with his chest puffed out, but has his concealed carry weapon on his hip. And, hey, I got my gun. It's like, okay, great, awesome. Like, you know what? Good for you. I'm glad you feel so insecure that you need to overcompensate by flashing your gun. Now, that's just a handgun. Like, okay, you have a handgun. Why do you need anything more? Like, why? Just why? Yeah. Why? And I guarantee you cannot give a good answer to that question because one does not exist. One does not exist.
And my favorite argument is let's arm the teachers. Okay, that seems like a real good idea. Yeah, because teachers don't have enough going on dealing with 6 and 7-year-olds or whatever, that you want to also arm them so that when two teachers get in a dispute, one can just pick the gun up and shoot the other one. That seems like a good way to just solve all these problems.
Yeah, it is. I mean, that I'm glad we're running out of time because we don't have enough time to talk about the idea of arming teachers. I mean, they don't even pay teachers enough to teach, and now you want to train them to attack. As far as I know, John, as the story goes yesterday, the shooter got into a confrontation with trained police officers prior to all of this, and guess what? He had an assault rifle and he had body armor. He got in. So what is arming a teacher going to do? And guess what, John? Throughout my life, I had some teachers that were well into their 60s. Sweet little old ladies. What are you going to do? Arm them? Like, what are you going to do?
That makes a lot of sense.
That's what I'm saying. This is the lengths people will go to avoid just doing what is so painfully obvious and necessary. And that is a complete overhaul of this Second Amendment. And I'm not saying like, maybe, technically overhauling the amendment, because obviously we know how, that process takes a while and everything like that. But I'm saying in terms of how we view it as a society, you do that and hopefully maybe things start to change. But unfortunately, that's not going to happen because, again, you would have thought after December 2014, Sandy Hook, things would have been different. This you would have thought then. This has to be the final straw, right? This has to be. Nope, nope,
Nope.
nope, not at all, not at all. It's just another. It's going to be talked about as the first this, and then we go on to talking about the second of such instance. And you know, when a guy slaughtered a bunch of people out in Las Vegas, that has to be the end of it, John, right? Nope, nope, not the end of it. You know, so it's sadly this is the reality we live in, and unfortunately, we have a bunch of weak, pathetic human beings in the positions that are capable of making these changes, and they don't have the gall, they don't have the courage, they don't have the humanity, just the human element to themselves to make that change. And it's pathetic. And again, I am not pointing to one side. I am pointing to the entire political landscape as we know it, because they are all complicit in it. Some more than others, but they are all complicit in it, because at some point or another, they've all had a chance to make a change, and they haven't. So that's it. Real quick, who wins tonight? Game 5, Celtics Heat. We'll close out the show by giving our very brief Game 5 preview.
I think less than 25% from three. Take care of the basketball. They'll win this game. Depends on who's available as well. Is Marcus Smart going to play? Is Rob Williams going to play? It almost feels like these coaches in the series are treating their roster like a pitching staff. Like, okay, he pitched today, so he can't pitch for the next 2 days or 3 days because no one's playing back-to-back games. But I like the Celtics tonight in probably another fairly low-scoring game.
I mean, it's pretty clear that Celtics are the better team, right? I mean,
yes.
we've seen 4 games, very wild back and forth games, and you know, obviously big leads for both teams. But I look at the Celtics and I say I think they had 2 very bad quarters in this series that basically led to both their losses. Both of which they came back. Obviously, Game 3. You know, they came to within 1, and it took really one of the worst playoff games of Jason Tatum's career for them to lose that game. So I look at that and I say, well, the Celtics are just a better team. Like Jimmy Butler's a fine player, but he was. I mean, the amount of criticism that Jason Tatum got, I understand, and I understand why it's more because I think, you know, he's viewed as obviously first team, you know, all pro guy. All NBA rather. I got football mixed sitting in my mind, but all NBA player, rising superstar. So I think obviously the standard is probably higher for Tatum than it is Jimmy Butler at this point. But all I heard after Game 3 and Game 1 and all this was how great Jimmy Butler was, and I run through defenders, this, that, and the other. Well, guess what? You looked pretty pedestrian, to say the least, in Game 4. I don't know if it's because of the injury. But outside of that, like, what do they have? I mean, that game was literally, they did not have, like, that game was never in their reach. They were down, what, 8-0, 9-0, and never once. I mean, it was 22-1 at one point. Like,
right. Yeah, no, I've never seen a score like that. Like, usually it's 0 or 2, but 1.
And,
they hit one.
And it should have been more, John. I mean, the Celtics weren't shooting that well early either.
No,
I mean, that game should have been 35-1 after the first quarter.
It could have been. I mean, the Celtics shot less than 40% from the floor, less than 25% from 3. I mean, if they had their shooting marks on that night, they would have won by 40 points instead of 20, which is what we're seeing in the NBA playoffs, by the way. Here's a crazy stat that maybe, chew on for the rest of the day. In the last 20 playoff games this season, the average margin of victory is 19 points. Like, we're not seeing any close game. That's really is. It's not good for the sport either. I mean, because if you're Joe whoever living in Nebraska and you want to sit down and watch the Celtics and Heat and really have no rooting interest, but you love the NBA, like, at halftime, you're like, this game's not really all that good.
I was bored. Like, I can't remember if I actually texted you or not about this, but I was thinking it. I was like, that game was boring. Like, I loved it. Terrible. I loved every second of it because the Celtics were rolling, obviously. But from the, I mean, I spent half the time just messing around on my phone, just like, all right, come on, let's get this over with. Like it's So, like, yeah, that is a problem. But obviously, as a Celtics fan, it's a good problem to have because, like, at the end of the day, like, well, if it's a boring win, it just means you're kind of dominating, and that's what they did. But it's kind of gives that all-star game feel to it, where it's like, all right, let's just go through the motions. It's entertaining, I guess, but I'd rather see something close. But hey, at this point, John, I don't care if they do this for 2 more games. I just want to see them get into the NBA final, and then we can talk about having close down to the wire matchups in Golden State. That's fine. I just want to see the Celtics get over this hump. So, I think they bucked the trend, the every other trend, and win tonight as well. Like I said, at the end of the day, I think they're just the better team. Even with or without Marcus Smart, obviously Robert Williams, that's going to be a big thing because he had a really nice game and limited minutes, really, in game 4. And are we going to get another great Jason Tatum game? Because I thought he played very well. And early on when he struggled, he started to facilitate more. And, we that's when he has great games. It's not necessarily about scoring a ton of points, and he ultimately did. But it's about, okay, if he's not hitting those shots early, it's like, okay, create offense for others. And I think that's what he can do at such a high level when he's focused enough to do that. And not always the case, but hopefully that is the case for the next, couple weeks while they get through, obviously, hopefully this series and then into the NBA final, which I'd assume is going to be Golden State. Obviously Dallas survived yesterday, but I do not see that lasting too long. But then again, we've seen stranger things happen. So
Golden State's the only team that lost a 3-1 lead in the finals. Maybe they'll be the first team in NBA history to lose a 3-0 lead in the playoffs.
You never know. Although Luka will really have to go above and beyond what he's done, and what he's done has been pretty phenomenal to begin with. So we'll see about that. But anyways, we will be back Friday, hopefully previewing a chance for the Celtics to clinch and end this series. If not, we'll be talking about them hopefully forcing a game 7, which would be on Sunday. So either way, we will be back Friday. Hopefully it will not involve too much political talk. I don't like to do that too often, but today was unfortunately an exception. But we will be back. We will talk about that. We'll talk about the NFL if there's any news, and of course the Stanley Cup playoffs, which is getting closer and closer to their conference final series here. So thank you everyone for tuning in. Give us a follow on Twitter at FPC Radio Live, at Full Press Radio, and of course go to fullpresscoverage.com, fullpresshockey.com, and check out all the great written and digital content available. Thank you very much. We'll talk to you soon.